Wheel of Genre, the show for readers who suspect that Lovecraft is only the tip of the heavily tentacled iceberg. Each month we spin the wheel and land on a new genre. Spies, mysteries, horror, romance, SF, it's all on the shelf. And right now we are reading every story in Jeff and Ann VanderMeer's anthology, The Weird. And we are starting off this series with the introduction by Jeff and Ann VanderMeer. I'm Zach, and this week I'm really interested in all the authors who I haven't really been aware of. I'm excited. I feel a great sense of hope about this reading journey we're on.
I'm Bob. I'm interested in the changes in weird horror and to see what the history looks like. They've worked really hard to give us a long evolution of weird fiction. And I think it'll be very interesting to see how it goes from kind of leaving Gothic fiction and then getting closer to today, what you might see on the internet, like Reddit fiction, stuff like No Sleep.
Reddit fiction, No Sleep, and the infamous and horrible 4chan board X, Paranormal. Yeah, I feel like this stuff has a long history of
creepypasta.
Creepypastas, indeed. So I see this text as really doing two separate things. One of which is really laying out the syllabus for the entire anthology that we're about to read through, delineating different movements, but also giving us a kind of chronological organization of how maybe it developed over time. But also, and I think probably more interesting for our uses, is this introduction is trying to actually put a pin in weird fiction and try to define what exactly makes it the weird.
That's okay, Zach. I think that's really important. They give lots of definitions, and especially from different horror authors, what is weird fiction. But at one point, Jeff VanderMeer says, I know it when I see it. And I'm curious, before we even start defining it, what do you think of going into a genre and saying, okay, you have to know it before you can learn it? What do you think about this? I know it when I see it.
It's bold. I mean, we can think of lots of genres that we've read in our time together that, it says a certain genre on the tin, but it actually doesn't participate with it in all the ways that you think it will. Probably our most recent example would be like Ian Fleming's Diamonds Are Forever, in which James Bond goes to America to take down a mob organization. It has the feeling more of a hard-boiled detective novel than it does a spy thriller.
Yeah.
So genre to me is always a little bit wishy-washy. Sometimes it feels to me more like genre delineations are less about what actually happens in the text and more about who the ideal reader that they're aiming for is. But I do think that they're right that you can pinpoint things that make the weird.
But how weird is weird, Zach? I think one definition we should really look at is Lovecraft, because when I think of weird fiction, that's the first person that comes to mind, the tentacles. But what he says about weird fiction, this is from 1927, and they include it in their book, The VanderMeer's. They say that Lovecraft is saying, okay, it's got to be something more than secret murder, bloody bones, or the sheeted form, clanking chain. So it's not Gothic fiction. It's something different from Gothic fiction. And then he says, instead, it's the pursuit of some indefinable and perhaps maddeningly unreachable understanding of the world beyond the mundane. So you have to grasp for something far beyond yourself. We've seen that in the Mountains of Madness, where everyone, if they glimpse too closely, they go insane. If they see the true monster, they go insane. Same for the Necronomicon. If you read it, you're done. Your goose is cooked, Zach. What do you think about this idea?
I think it's great. And I think that, this idea of a character trying to understand something which should technically be impossible or perhaps even beyond like the laws of physics or rationality is always an intriguing point whenever we see it pop up in other stories. You can see brushes of this, for example, in like the Hyperion series where the space pilgrims land on the planet and find the deep caverns underneath, carved into the rock from millions of years before humanity even existed. And yet there's Christian iconography in those caverns. Stuff that makes you go, wait a minute, it's impossible. But it's a juicy mystery.
Time tombs. How do you move backwards through time? Okay, so if it's juicy mystery and it's getting you interested, I'm not sure where it's going to be different from Gothic fiction. We've seen in Frankenstein, that's a weird book. You bring dead material back to life, and then it has a life of its own. It becomes a romantic poet, becomes obsessed with this little weird, quaint family. That feels like weird fiction to me. Why is that not part of this anthology? Is it crossing a line out of Gothic fiction, or is it weird fiction? Sorry, is it crossing the line into weird fiction?
Well, I've always thought Frankenstein was betrayed by Hollywood in a sense, because to me, Mary Shelley's text is quite weird. There's so much commonality between Mary Shelley's Frankenstein and H.P. Lovecraft's Herbert West Reanimator, for example, both in tone and kind of the ideas they explore. And yet, when Hollywood does Frankenstein, it turns it more into a creature feature. Everyone run away, the man with screws in his neck is coming to get you. And in that sense, it kind of flattens the weird into just something that's much more reminiscent of the Victorian horror, the Gothic horror.
Just made me think of someone with a wrench chasing after Frankenstein to solve the problem. So it's more, okay, that's an interesting point. But okay, I want to look at another definition, Zach, before we move on, start comparing it to other things. Because the VanderMeers also say that it's got characters that have to come to meet this weird. And they often become obsessed with it. So it's not just that I'm trying to comprehend it, it's too far beyond me. It's I go down a slippery slope into a spiral. I become obsessed with this thing. And I think we see that a lot in the Reddit stories, in the no sleep stories. A character becomes too obsessed with something, they can't stop thinking about it. And it reminds me, and I think we'll see this in even more of the Southern Reach, but it reminds me of Whitby from Authority, the VanderMeer story.
VanderMeer, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think I've always thought that the character who is slowly becoming more and more obsessed is a great way to keep the reader hooked, in the sense that, these point of view characters are always, in some ways, a stand-in for the reader. As they learn things, so does the reader. And when the character is truly obsessed or truly befuddled or truly mesmerized by something that's seemingly impossible, it really adds weight to the reader's journey. It makes you feel like, wow, what is this payoff going to be? Now, frequently in weird fiction, I tend to find that, the more weird the object that they're obsessed with, the less answers we actually truly get. You know what I mean? A good weird fiction story never quite resolves itself. And actually, the VanderMeers have this point here as they're trying to mark it down. They say that a good weird fiction story does not rely on scares or twist endings in the same way that a strict horror novel or maybe like a pulp fiction, more episodic type thing would rely on a twist ending. And, the jump scare and the twist ending, those are resolutions. You know what I mean? Those are answers, even if they're scary answers. I think weird fiction is not going to give that to us.
I don't think that scared you very good. Okay, what do you think? Would Crime and Punishment, Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment, where Raskolnikov is going a little bit more and more crazy. He's trying to make this decision about if he's going to kill her, and then, well, everyone knows the story. Never mind, that's not a spoiler. Then kills her, then unravels even further. It's kind of obsessive in a way. Or Notes from Underground is someone who's also obsessive. I wonder if we took those characters and we put them in a situation where they are trying not just to comprehend themselves, but comprehend some sort of greater universal mystery. Because I also, when I think of weird fiction, it makes me think of Lovecraft and cosmic horror. I feel like often cosmic horror and weird fiction just go hand in hand. Is there any difference? Are they exactly the same? Could Jeff VanderMeer just have called this 100 cosmic horror stories?
Well, here's the thing. I feel like cosmic horror needs to have some kind of off-worldly element, something larger than humanity. In that sense, a story like Three Body Problem, for example, could have cosmic horror elements to it. There's something unknowable about the Trisolarians, the creatures coming from the star system with 3 suns in it, because they have an entirely different set of knowledge, an entirely different set of technology than what humanity has been able to develop. But when you look at a book like Three Body Problem, that can have tinges of cosmic horror in it, but I think that it doesn't have the weird in it. And that's simply because even though there's something unknowable about that cosmic horror, it still obeys more or less the the diegetic laws of physics, the laws of physics that exist within the story. And I think for something to be weird, it needs to be totally beyond that. There needs to be this element of total ungraspable, uncomprehending blankness or mystery or conundrum.
I feel the blankness all the time, Zach. Okay, I'm going to get us in trouble, Zach. I've got this theory, and I think it's probably, well, we'll see. I think, so if we take the three-body problem, yes, there is crazy universal mysteries happening. It's almost cosmic horror. I think for weird fiction, there has to be something at risk for the writer, because while there's probably crazy things happening in Lilith's head, I wonder, he's got it pretty well controlled. It's almost like the author has a total plan and is trying to make a very complete story. I wonder for weird fiction, is there something veiled? Is there something at risk? And could that something perhaps be the writer's sanity? By doing these weird stories, are you getting too much into the head of the different characters into these different situations? Are you also along for the ride of, oh no, I'm reading the Necronomicon?
Well, that's a really interesting point. Jeff and Ann VanderMeer point out how there's various levels of how much the authors are drinking their own Kool-Aid. For some people, the weird can just be an aesthetic, but for other people, elements of the weird could be what they truly actually believe. I think Philip K. Dick is not included in this collection, but I think he's one of those people that they said they wish could have been
they wanted
included.
to,
Yeah. To me, he's the kind of poster child for an author who wrote truly insane things and also truly believed every word of them. You know what I mean?
Maybe.
So I feel like we got a spectrum here. A spectrum between just the aesthetics of the weird and the truly weird mind that is scribbling these.
Okay, they talk a lot about influences, and I think that's really important to look at what is going into this. What influences are coming together to bring this weird about? And they say that, okay, we have surrealism, symbolism, decadent literature. We got to look into that, Zach. The new wave. So when we get later and we have Harlan Ellison pushing forward the new wave, I thought that was interesting. We'll see how that influences it. But then also the more esoteric strains of the Gothic. But they say that none of the influencers truly defined the weird, but they assimilated into the aquifer along with Lovecraftian and Kafkaesque approaches. And I think that is very important. The two approaches that are cited are Kafka and Lovecraft. So if you write like these authors, you might be doing weird.
Yeah, it's interesting. And funnily enough, we're in the middle of recording episodes about the Southern Reach trilogy, tetralogy at this point. We just finished book number 2, Authority. And when we were talking about, we pointed out how book 1 is so heavily influenced by Lovecraft and book 2 is so heavily influenced by Kafka. To me, reading the Southern Reach tetralogy feels like a kind of love letter to the tradition of weird fiction because it's pulling in all of these different influences. It's pulling in all of these kind of big moments, these big feelings. I'm already recognizing things as we read through this anthology that I see Jeff VanderMeer echoing in his own work. And I'm interested if it's actually true, if we will feel the same way at the end of all of this. Are the two greats, are the two titans of the genre actually H.P. Lovecraft and Franz Kafka?
Okay, Zach. One other thing that they talk about is when weird fiction, I think, got really popular, or people were really calling it weird fiction, was when Lovecraft was kind of getting that group together. When we were reading Robert E. Howard, we found, they were buddies, they were writing letters, and then Lovecraft said, hey, Howard, how about you write everything inside of my universe? I said, okay. But here, the VanderMeers are saying there is a Weird Tales, which we've read quite a few of now, and Lovecraft Circle group. And those writers we've read a lot of, Howard, Fritz Leiber, Clark Ashton Smith, Howard Wandre, and August Derleth. Now, those last two I've never read. I'm probably saying their names wrong. But I think if we read some of these authors, I bet they're in the collection, we will really get a understanding of the, golden age weird, if we could use that term.
Wow. Yeah. To borrow from our science fiction delineation. Well, it's interesting you mentioned Fritz Leiber. Viewers of the show will recall that we just finished reading the Dangerous Visions anthology edited by Harlan Ellison. And Fritz Leiber had his story Gonna Roll the Bones in that Dangerous Visions anthology. Now, Dangerous Visions is really characterized by its adherence to the new wave, or its exemplification of the new wave of science fiction. And here we have one writer, Fritz Leiber, who seems to be traveling both worlds. Now, from what I remember of Fritz Leiber's story, it definitely, I don't want to say condemned it as fantasy or condemned it as fable, but it definitely stuck out from the rest of that anthology. And I suspect it would be more at home in this one.
Yes, right. We didn't condemn it. We gave it thumbs up, but it was more like I liked it. I thought it was nuts.
I don't remember that.
Just remember the dice floating across the hell.
I try to forget.
Yes, I thought it was great. I think about it all the time. Gonna roll the bones. Yes, I feel like it would probably be more suited in weird, and I bet a lot of what was in, because the VanderMeer's are saying, look, there's also a big influence of the new wave in this. So once we get to that era, the 60s, the 70s, I think we will see a very strong crossover where those stories could go in either one, I bet. Because even, what was the one? It was very science fiction, but it's about everyone becoming really, really stupid. The new breed, Happy Breed by Sladek. Yeah. That feels like it could also go in weird fiction. Although there's a science fiction explanation, the feeling is that something unknowable is happening. Yeah. Even though it's explained, it's just so strange.
Well, I'll tell you what I think. There's one missing element that I think that weird fiction has that almost none of the stories in the Dangerous Visions anthology had. Almost none of new wave, that I think actually separates it from new wave science fiction. And that's this feeling, which Ann and Jeff VanderMeer point out, that it blends terror with this feeling of the strangely beautiful, this kind of horrific sublimity. And I can't think of a single new wave science fiction that actually captured that feeling for me. There's a lot of horror and violence and gruesomeness, but it always feels very, slasher flick. It feels very embodied, and it feels very like blood and guts everywhere. Material, I might even say. For weird stories, the body seems almost secondary. It's like a mental terror. It's the terror of something being larger than you can see or comprehend or know, and it's out to get you.
One other thing too is along the same lines, they said it also causes the destabilization of supernatural fiction. Now, when we saw Dracula, when we read Dracula and we read Frankenstein, there's a romantic feel where these characters are pursuing that awesomeness of something overwhelming. I wonder in here where we have those crazy thing, the appreciation of the awesome or the overwhelming, and then we have a supernatural explanation for them. If the weird is going to go to those extreme ends, the almost ecstatic ends of taking in nature or something inexplicable, but if it's going to no longer be supernatural but be kind of indefinable, like what has really happened to us, we can't even know for sure. There's going to be maybe holes in the explanations or in the experiences.
I want to know for you, just as a reader, just as someone who loves books, what are you most excited to get more familiar with in the course of this anthology?
I'm really interested in the spooky, creepy stuff, the older stuff that is departing from Gothic fiction, and when is it no longer just a good ghost story, and when is it something weird? What about you?
I've always liked Borges, and to me, it feels like he's always kind of shown up in the English literary world just as a singular entity, with no precedents and no antecedents. I want to see who are the people that got that ball rolling in Latin America and who carried it even further after Borges. So for me, it's the kind of international scenes of weird that I am excited to explore.
Love Borges, love anything like that. Full speed ahead.
Talk to you later, Bob.
Talk to you later, Zach.